Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which comes to us from Wildy, Simmonds and Hill Publishing. It's an important book and one that's been around now for some time. It's now called the Firearms Law Handbook, this book here. It's called now in an 8th edition with that new title. It's been edited this time by Saunsbury and Nick Doherty. Don't know quite how he styles that. It can be either way. Can I thank them both for an excellent book? The title I've given this, I discussed it with Elizabeth and I'm the lead writer on this particular review. I've given the title an important handbook for those involved in all aspects of firearms and gun law. Now in an 8th edition from Wildy. And I'll explain a little bit about the history of this book in a minute. Let's look at it first of all. There it is, a paperback. You can see the front of it there, then the spine. And then the back you've got photographs of the two authors. Probably see the two of them there. Don't know that you can read very much of the the writing on the back because of the inverted colour scheme. But there we go. There's the front anyway. The book runs to 300 pages, round about that. The index at the back is by page numbering. It's detailed index and a lot of information there. References are to page numbers. The front of the book is there. You've got some information about the previous editions and what it was known as before it became the Firearms Law Handbook. Then that's what we've currently got at the moment. It's down as the 8th edition, but as I say, it had different names throughout its history. There's the blurb about Wildy, then the contents section. You can see the structure. Really very informative. You should find everything that you want about the various guns. Shotguns, you've got various pieces of information. Shotguns, for instance, are very specific, and the ammunition. You've then got protected birds, all sorts of other points. The criminal offences that are covered as well. 17 main chapters. Then you've got an appendices with quite a large amount of information in the appendices about specific areas such as antique firearms, the closed season for shooting and so forth. Then you've got a preface, and then you've got, after that's written in January 2019, the preface. This book is a little older than some of the ones I've been reviewing, but I'm reviewing this in 2020. Table of cases there. There's quite a lot of case law, not that much, you'll be pleased to hear. Statutes. Then after that, of course, you've got the various pieces of legislation. Then you've got statutory instruments as well to come in with that. Not that much. Some European material, of course, as well. Then tables of other material there. That's British Medical Association and Home Office circulars and so forth. Then you've got a list of abbreviations. Very helpful again, because there's a lot of abbreviation again in this area, and it's sometimes very easy to forget what a particular abbreviation really means, so it's useful to have that. Then you get into the structure, general definitions and introduction. You've got paragraph numbering at the side there, and you've got a little bit of footnoting. You can see a bit of footnoting there. Sometimes they have footnoting as a little bit. It's not been overdone at all. Then at the back, as I say, you've got, after the various chapter heads, you've got the various appendices at the back, which I'm just getting to at the moment. That's after the main chapters there. The appendices are there. They're very short, but again, it's quite important depending on what you're looking for, because this book is, I think, very relevant for people who own guns and for basically the wider area of gun law, as it was then called. I'll make some comments in a minute about where we are at the moment with this area of law, because this handbook and its subject matter remain a popular work from Wildy, Simmonds and Hill Publishing. And the authors, of course, Saunsbury and Nick Doherty, give the reader substantial details on all aspects of the law relating to the use of firearms in Britain in the 2020s in about 300 pages. So there are, of course, other publications, but this one is, I think, very useful and actually has proved to be a popular title with Wildy. We consider that those who enforce and apply the law will find this title of invaluable assistance in their work. It was originally published under a different title called Gun Law in 1999 by the late Godfrey Sandys-Winsch, and then became first published as a renamed title, the British Firearms Law Handbook, in 2011. It's now known as the Firearms Law Handbook, and it's now in the 8th edition, having gone through the different titles. So it's clear from this edition it'd be great assistance also to those who handle and sell guns, both commercially or for sport, as approaches change towards this subject matter and this area in the 21st century. And I think that is something that will happen. We don't have a major problem the way some countries do with firearms, but there's still a tremendous amount of ignorance about them, and they are, in my view, far too readily available. We think, of course, that readers will find everything they need to know here contained in one volume. Though the subjects covered can be complex, we found that the title has been written in an approachable style to be understood by all of those with an interest in the subject. I don't have an interest in it, but I've been in the army, so I've had to use weapons, and I have a great deal of respect for them, and I think they should be very, very carefully looked after, and very few people should have access to them. The classification of firearms is covered in detail, as are the many different circumstances in which authority can possess firearms and ammunition, and can and actually it should be granted, because the authority to give the possession of these weapons is really one of the big, obviously apart from enforcement, it's one of the big areas in the first place, which is such a controversial issue in other countries, like for instance the United States, where they have a very different view under the Constitution. We don't have a written Constitution. This book, we think, will assist those who engage in all types of shooting, those who run shooting clubs and playgrounds, collectors, registered firearms dealers. Obviously that includes antiques, and there's a useful bit about antiques at the back of the book, and those who require the authority of the Secretary of State to possess prohibited weapons. And clearly in very recent times there's been a very substantial tightening up and very serious sanctions if you have a weapon when you shouldn't have one. And I call them weapons. That's what we call them in the army. We don't really call them guns. We call them something slightly different. They're not shooters, for instance. They are weapons. The rules governing shooting by young persons are also considered, which I thought was very important, together with the various exemptions available where a certificate is not required. And of course, since the 7th edition of the work appeared in 2011, there have been significant changes to firearms legislation, with, I think, more reforms to follow once we get over the coronavirus epidemic. And I'm recording that at the height of the epidemic, this particular review. The new laws are covered in full in the book, and they include key changes to the Policing and Crime Act 2017, including new definitions of firearm, of component part, deactivated weapon and antique firearm, because of course the classic problem is that people will buy weapons in a certain condition and then they can be altered into live weapons which can be used. And again, bearing in mind the certification and the authority, you can see the problems very easily. The handbook is concerned with the law as it stands today. That's what the authors say, and that means 2020 onwards. I don't envisage any big changes initially with the law, but I do think in the future there will have to be some new legislation, because again there are rather too many unauthorised firearms on the street. Now, Saunsbury and Doherty's handbook reviews all the relevant case law authorities from the higher courts regarding this area of law, and that's since 2011. And they deal with the likely effects on the UK now that Britain has left the EU. Now, I say that because obviously we were, the beginning of 2020, looking at, we've left the European Union formally at the end of January. Then we've had this main epidemic, which is going to be with us for some time. So I do not know where the future will go, but we do know that we've got the basic laws in place until there are additional changes. Let me finish by saying this. We found that the police policy on the licensing of firearms well covered here, in addition to the process of application and appeal to the Crown Court, for those obviously who wish to do so. I can understand that there may be circumstances. I have very grave doubts about some of the circumstances as a citizen, but however, that is where the law is at the moment. And fortunately, apart from what I referred to earlier about changing components of firearms and the way in which the antique one can suddenly become a live one, those areas are reasonably well covered. Applications to lift a firearms prohibition are also considered if that becomes relevant. I'm glad to say I've never really had much to do with this particular area of law myself, apart from seeing some obviously dealing with criminal matters in a more general sense where firearms have been used, but I've never really made or been involved in applications. The publication date of the paperback 8th edition is the 1st of August 2019, and I'm recording this in March 2020. There is the book again, purple cover. You can see that. It's a very popular book. I'm amazed. I was quite surprised with Wildy's when I said this is a really popular book. Now I'm going to come to the middle of the book. Refusal, revocation and appeal. Very important areas because of what people do and how the law works, then how much it costs to appeal. You see a lot of detail here, very practical detail, because this is, if anything, it's a handbook, but it's a practical book. Let's say right at the end, you've got some various appendices. Quite useful for those who are involved in using guns to shoot animals. It's not something I'm happy with myself, but there we are. There is the closed season, and then details about that and what animals can be shot. I do mention that because obviously that is a controversial area for a lot of people. It's not particularly controversial for me because I just don't think most people should have guns. It's as simple as that. However, that's my personal view. And in any event, I'd like to say thank you, because this book I think is very helpful in guiding people towards what the law actually is at the moment. So a very big thank you to Wildy, to Andrew Riddoch, his team, and also of course to the writers and everybody involved. It's a really first class work. Thank you. Bye bye.